right, coming up here on Dallas Mavericks today, you got Harrison Graham and Jeffrey Cooperstein with you. We thought we'd go through the full roster and rank players 15 all the way to 1 in order of importance as the Mavericks offseason is mostly done at this point. Certainly, I think, trades could be revisited at some point, especially at the trade deadline, but I think they're pretty set. So we'll get to that here in just a second, but we want to hear from you guys first. Who is the most underrated player on the Mavericks roster right now? I think there's quite a few candidates here, Coop.
Yeah, you could go with a guy like Omax Prospers going into his second year. You could go with a guy like Dante Exum. I think there are multiple candidates. I don't think there's a right or a wrong answer. So let us know what you guys think down in the comments. Do you have a preference?
I would say I'll save it.
Okay.
I'll have some thoughts on that as we go through this video.
Before we get started, I was challenged by our Steelers host, Jack Sperry, to a Twitter followers challenge. I don't know why he challenged me because I already have 200 more than him. You can see I'm sitting at 2,200 while he's just over 2,000. If you would please give me a follow on Twitter at Jeff_Coop27, just so I don't have to hear it from Sperry. I sit next to him every single day, and the guy's always like, oh, I'm going to catch you. He's not going to catch me, and I know you guys are going to help me out. So please go ahead and give me a follow on Twitter at Jeff_Coop27.
Go show Coop some love. All right, we're doing this exercise as if the Markieff Morris, AJ Lawson swap has already happened. Depending on when you're watching this, maybe it has already happened. So keep that in mind. Keith, OG, vibes guy. As far as actual impact, not that much.
We saw in the finals that he literally could not move.
He looked like an average YMCA
He
player.
did. He looked absolutely awful. But again, that's not why he's here. But as far as pure playing ability goes, he is the worst player on this roster. I don't think there's any question.
At number 14, we're going to go Dwight Powell. I think, you could argue 13 and 14 would be flipped, but I think we're kind of hoping 13. It has a little bit more of a impact.
Yes.
Unlike Markieff Morris, I think in a pinch in the regular season, Dwight Powell can help you some. I mean, bigs get hurt a lot, so I'm sure at some point Gafford or Lively is going to miss some time, so that's where Powell's value really comes into play. But as we saw in the playoffs when he had to play,
Can't play him.
He's in big-time competition.
Kid tried to play him in 2 to 3 minute spurts, and those spurts were an absolute disaster.
They lost Game 4 against the Timberwolves
because of his 3
in
minutes.
His 3 minutes.
Yeah.
It was incredible.
He can't play anymore, but hopefully in the regular season he can give you a little bit of something. The reason I have Omax at 13 over Powell is kind of just projecting a little bit of hope here. Hopefully he shows some development and shows some signs of improvement. Didn't really see that in the Summer League, which is somewhat a cause of for concern. But I do think that Omax will have a big future. It might just not be this year, and I think hopefully he just shows some projectability is all.
Yeah, I mean, look, unlike Dwight Powell, in theory his arrow's at least pointing up. Omax's is, so we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. I think he'll at least get some opportunities, but I think if we're being, honest, none of these three guys are going to be in the initial rotation.
No.
And in Morris's and Powell's case, they probably never will unless there's injuries to the front court where Dwight Powell could have to play a little bit. At number 12, this is kind of when you start getting into could they be in the rotation, will they? Jaden Hardy. I think he gave the Mavs some solid punch in the postseason. He certainly helped in that OK series a little bit. As against Minnesota as well. There's still some defensive issues there. There's still kind of the issue, Coop, of like he's really more of a 2-guard, but he's in a point guard body. But I thought he improved as a playmaker, and we saw some of that in the postseasons. Big year for him. We got to see him take a jump, I think.
Yeah, this I don't know if it's quite make it or break it, but it's not that far off for Jaden Hardy. Look, I do know that he is an NBA scorer, and if that was his only role on this team was to just go out and score in volume, I think he'd be able to do it. Like, I think if he was on a bad team, he could average 15 points a game.
And think about what we were talking about going into last season. We were saying he could be a potential sixth man for this team. So I think that goes to show how much this team has improved, but I do think a little bit it also goes to show is he hasn't taken quite the jump we were hoping he would at this point in time. He's certainly improved, but has he improved enough to be, kind of a consistent piece in this rotation? That remains to be seen.
And the Mavs traded up for him in the draft, so they've invested a decent amount in Jaden Hardy, and I think they want to see him work. So I bet he'll get some opportunity here in the rotation. especially early in the season, just to see if he can be a guy that can be relied on down the stretch.
Maxi Kleber at number 11. I think 11 and 10, who we'll get to in a second, is certainly debatable. I think in the playoffs, clearly Kleber had more value than who we're going to get to at number 10.
Yep.
But he's getting older. He's not improving at this point in his
Never
career.
healthy.
Injuries are a major issue. So, I think he will have a role in the rotation. I just don't think it'll be a big one. So, Kleber at number 11 at this point in time. Before we get into the top 10 of our Mavericks player rankings with our roster analysis here, how about Game Time? You want to go check out the Mavericks next year? Game Time is going to be the best place to go to get tickets. Rangers starting to stack a few wins here as well. I was at the park over the weekend, had a good time out there, got good deals thanks to our friends over at Game Time, the best ticketing app that is out there. They specialize in last-minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals as well, for the lowest price guaranteed. That is their promise. And when you use code ChatSports, you're going to get $20 off your first purchase for you new customers. If you already have an existing account, that is not the case. But, hey, listen, terms apply with that code ChatSports. You can see views from the seats on the app. There's nothing worse than getting to a park and not knowing where your seat is, not knowing what your vantage point is. Game Time's got that all covered before you even purchase tickets. It's an awesome app. Get your tickets today with Game Time. Again, last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Go download the app. Use code ChatSports if you are a first-time customer and get $20 off. Okay, top 10. Dante Exum. Certainly, I think Kleber helped you more in the playoffs than Exum.
Agreed.
I think that's fair to say. But Exum was certainly the better regular season player last year. He's still young. Like Kleber, he's a versatile defender, just at a different position. If he can play like he did in the regular season last year, or at least close to that, I think he will at least get some decent minutes here.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he's going to shoot 49% from three like he did last year, and I know it was on limited volume, but if he can still be pretty efficient from downtown and guard like he did last season, he'll certainly find some minutes here in Jason Kidd's rotation. All Jason Kidd cares about is if you play hard on defense. Like, he knows that this team's going to score
That's why Kleber keeps getting opportunities.
Exactly. He knows that this team's going to score at a pretty high level, so if you can guard, you're going to find your way onto the court, plain and simple. So I believe Dante Exum will.
Exum's a better defender than Spencer Dinwiddie, but Dinwiddie is definitely your best bench creator at the guard position. Really good ball handler. He can get downhill. He can create for others. Obviously had a great run here a couple of years ago. He's back. Will have a little bit lesser of a role than he did, but certainly do think he will have a role on this basketball team.
Yeah, I think as an offensive creator, he's probably your best guard off the bench for that. You know he can give you instant offense at a pretty high level. He did play the best basketball of his career in the 76 games he played for the Mavs, so I have reason for optimism that he can give you a little spark on the offensive end that maybe no one else on the bench can, and I think he will find himself into some games, especially when the Mavs are looking for a little spark as far as scoring goes.
What do you guys think? Who do you think plays more? Type E for Exum, D for Dinwiddie, because they're just different players. I mean, they're both big guards. Exum more of that defensive guy, Dinwiddie more of an offensive general. So, I would lean Dinwiddie just with what he did a few years ago and his ability to create instant offense. But, if he's struggling, if he's having an inefficient start to the season, then they'll probably opt to go defense with Exum. So, it'll be curious to see how Jason Kidd navigates that situation.
I bet it's a game-by-game basis. Like, one game Exum may play the 25 minutes, one game Dinwiddie may play the 25 minutes. So it's probably just dependent on matchup and who's the hot hand.
Quentin Grimes, we're all excited to see what he can do for this team. 3-and-D player, in theory, an upgrade over Josh Green. We got him at number 8, Coop, because I think his role is pretty well defined. It's go give us what Josh Green did, but be more effective at it.
Exactly.
Defend a little bit better and, give you some more volume scoring from the three-point arc.
It's a pretty like-for-like swap between him and Josh Green, and Josh Green was, the 8th guy last year, so I kind of think that's what Grimes is going to be. You're just hoping you get a little bit more efficiency, like you said, and maybe some more tenacious defense as well, because I think Grimes is a better defender than Josh Green is.
He's a little longer,
exactly.
too.
So I kind of think that's where he fits in, and I know that they're excited about his potential growth as well. Again, last year of a rookie deal, Mavs could sign him to an extension, so that's something to monitor as the offseason goes on and as we creep up towards opening night.
We got Daniel Gafford at number 7, Coop. we'll get to 6 in a minute. You could certainly debate this. I mean, he was the starting center for this team the final 25-ish games throughout the playoff run. Certainly played a big role. You know, I think almost really 4 through 7 you could kind of debate.
Agreed.
Pretty heavily. It's really 5 through 7 as well. You know, it's typically a center isn't going to be your sixth man, but it wouldn't shock me if Gafford or Lively was, whichever one they want to bring off the bench. So I think you and I both think Lively will be the starter just because he's going to continue to improve, whereas I'm not saying Gafford can't get better, but like his game is kind of what his game is.
Yep.
Like he's a lob threat. He's a pretty good rim protector. He'll rebound some, set screens, but he's not going to add a corner three like Dereck Lively's working on and stuff like that. So we've got him here at number 7, but certainly could be a little higher.
Yeah, the center isn't your typical sixth man who comes and gives you instant offense and is a high-volume kind of scorer, but I do believe that whether it's Gafford or Lively, I believe it will be Gafford, coming off the bench, that they'll be the first guy off the bench. I mean, last year, especially in the postseason, Gafford played the first, 2.5, 3 minutes of the game, and then Lively would come in pretty early. I kind of expect the rotation to be that way. It's just flipped, where Lively is going to be the starter and Gafford's going to be subbing him in. And I do believe that he'll get plenty of minutes. He's very important to this team. And it is debatable between 7 and 6, but I believe that Gafford is going to have a huge role on this squad, as will Naji Marshall, who I have at number 6. And the reason I have him at 6 is because I do think he is your best defender out there right now. And he's a guy that the Mavs are going to heavily rely on, I think even more so than Gafford.
I think he's going to close games a lot. And that's going to be fascinating to kind of monitor because obviously Klay Thompson, you know, the Mavs sold him, but I think there will be some games where Klay's not closing.
Agreed.
Where they're going to go Marshall and Washington for defense, over Klay Thompson. So, again, I think kid's got options. He's got, this is going to be a good test this year for Jason Kidd because one thing you and I have questioned him about is feeling out the game at hand at times. And when you have too many chess pieces sometimes, that's got to be a strength of yours. So, that's going to be a feel-out process early in the year for him. And, look, Marshall replacing Derek Jones. Jones had a big role in this team, so I expect Marshall to play quite a bit here.
Yeah, and they're going to need him to play well, too, because, like I said, he's the guy that is going to guard the opposing team's best player most of the time. So they're going to need big things from Naji Marshall, and I think they're expecting that.
P.J. Washington, who obviously came over and did a lot of good things and played better defense than expected.
Yes, he did.
And, I meant to talk to you about this, Coop. I saw a tweet a few weeks ago. I think they're trying to reconstruct his shot a little bit.
They are. They've been trying to do that since they traded him. A lot of it's in his footwork as well. They basically been trying to reinvent his shot since they traded for him. They were even working on it in the season last year, and now that's really ramped up in the offseason. So they see potential in him as a guy who can knock down the three at a pretty high level.
We saw it in bunches. Now, it wasn't consistent, but the middle, the first 2 rounds of the playoffs, was it the first 2 or the middle 2 rounds? For sure that OKC series.
OKC was excellent.
He's capable of being a knockdown shooter. Now, I don't think he's going to be one of these, I think he shot 48% from the corner over a 7-game stretch in the playoffs. He's not going to do that, but 40% from the corner, 36, 37% overall from 3. I think that's very much in his game. And obviously, he's not just a catch and shoot guy. He can put the ball on the deck. He's got a midi, decent floater game. So, he's going to be probably your 4th scorer offensively. And if he continues to evolve as a defender like we saw him do on the fly last year, that's really big, especially if Marshall's going to come off the bench, Coop. Washington may have to start these games defending the opposing team's best player.
Yeah, he's going to have to. It is a big offseason for P.J. Washington, and I have faith that the Mavs are going to improve his shot, and he's going to add another layer to his game that we didn't see. It's very hard to, change your game on the fly in the middle of a season, and I know the Mavs were kind of working on that with him, but now that he's had the full offseason to recover and try to improve his game, I do expect big things from him this year. I also expect big things from Dereck Lively, who I think will be this team's starting center. All reports say that the Mavs are going to trend that way as well. I think sky's the limit for Lively, man. He is so good for this team. He provides exactly what they need, I think, on both the offensive and defensive end, and I can't wait to see him play a full 82-game season as a starter with this lineup.
I expect him to play 25 to 28 minutes per game and Gafford to be in that 20 to 23-minute range. I still think both are going to be over 20 minutes most nights. But I do think Lively, I mean, the guy just had such a good year. We saw in the playoffs he hit that corner three. I think he's going to be in the lab working on that a lot this offseason. And if he can be a guy, that takes 1.5 threes per game and shoots in the mid-30s, that just gives you a dimension that Gafford doesn't. So I expect Lively to start. I'll be curious, Coop, if they look to beef him up a little bit.
Yeah.
Not that he's thin, but he's a little wiry. Can he add 10 pounds of muscle this offseason? That would certainly go a long way. I think he's got all-star potential in this league. I really do.
I do too. I'm very excited about him. I think he might be in line when the new CBA kicks in for one of those mega rookie extensions. And that's scary to give a center, but honestly, I've loved his vibes as far as is off the court as well. He's been through a lot with this team, and I think the team has helped him out. And for a guy who's just 20 years old, I mean, he's kind of seen it all, and he's mature beyond his years. So.
Look, I'll be honest. I debated putting him number 3. Now,
yeah.
we're going to put Klay Thompson third.
And I do think it is a debate, which is something to be said, given Klay Thompson's a four-time champion.
If Lively takes a jump offensively, adds more than just being kind of a cleanup guy or alley-oop guy, I think there's an argument with how active he is defensively, offensive glass, rebounding. But I think you got to go Klay 3 here. He was plan A of the offseason. You needed a floor spacer, a guy who could knock down threes and score in some other ways as well. We'll see how he plays defensively this year. It hasn't gone well the last couple of years in that regard. I
do think that's a question mark. I really do.
For sure. And that's why I mentioned earlier, Naji Marshall might have to close a lot of games over Klay Thompson. But, Klay Thompson gives you 4 threes and 21 points in his minutes. Who cares if he's out there with 2 minutes left? So.
And I do think it'll be a little bit of defense-offense going down the stretch as well, especially if there are timeouts involved. Out of defensive possessions, it'll be Marshall, and offense, it'll be Klay. So I think those will be interchangeable. But yeah, that might be. We might have to do a segment on that. That might be the biggest question for Jason Kidd is who closes for this team. We know it's going to be Luka and Kyrie. Is it Gafford or Lively? Is it Thompson and Marshall at the 4?
I think on most nights, just since we're bringing it up, and we definitely could do a longer video on this, I think you'll see Luka, Kyrie, and Lively almost most of the time. Now, there will be exceptions where Gafford's clearly just having a better night.
Does Washington get a small ball 5 look? Maybe?
I don't know.
There are options is kind of what I'm trying to say.
There's options. I think those 3 will close most nights, and then a combination of Washington, Klay, and Marshall for 2 of the other 3 spots will typically close. But listen, there might be nights where Grimes is closing, where Kleber's closing. I mean, they've got options, and the top 2 is pretty simple.
We already know.
Kyrie 2, Luka 1. Listen, we said it last offseason. Coop and I pushed for a Luka MVP campaign. He was pretty close.
He should have gotten second. It's an absolute joke that Shea got second over him.
We'll see if he's this year. I don't know if I'll go on that campaign leading into this year just because he's coming off injury. He was so beat up at the end of last season.
I think
if he has a top 3 or 4 MVP season again and these other guys do what they're supposed to do, this team's going to be dangerous.
I think this is going to be a load management season for Luka.
Could be.
I don't know if he plays as many back-to-backs. And I know he loves to play basketball. That's all he wants to do is just hoop. But at some point, he does have to get some rest. I pray to God he's over in the Balkans just sitting on a boat somewhere in the middle of the sea, just not doing anything. Maybe even smoking some hookah. That's fine with me. But as long as he's getting some rest, the knee is healing. Hopefully the ankle's healing as well, and he's getting all back healthy. We know the guy's awesome. I think he's the best player in the NBA. You can obviously argue that. But look, man, this team could be special, especially if he's going full throttle.
I mean, you've got your top 12 would all be in rotations on a lot of teams.
Yep.
Jaden Hardy would be in a rotation for probably half the league.
If Jaden Hardy was playing for the Pistons, I think he'd average 15 a game.
He'd probably be their 6th man.
He would, yeah, exactly.
I mean, seriously. So you're deep. You got star power. You add a lethal shooter in Thompson. So you got to feel good about where this roster is, man. Is it the best in the NBA? Type Y for yes, type in for no. I think the only other teams you could at least make an argument for, you still got to go Boston. They don't have the depth Dallas has, but that top 6 is just, you're not going to match that in this league, I don't think. Philadelphia's got a good combination of a starting 5 and star power.
Oklahoma City.
And then I think the Knicks have good depth, but I don't think they're as good at the top of their roster.
Don't trust them as far as I can throw them either.
So, I think at minimum, this is a top 4 roster. Like, I'm not putting Denver ahead of Dallas.
No, I'm not either, or Minnesota
I think
for that matter.
You could say Jokic and Murray is a better duo, but like
Maybe
3 through 12, I mean, Denver doesn't have a 10th man that can play consistent minutes.
And they just lost KCP, who is arguably their third most important player.
They're going to bank on Russell Westbrook.
When has that ever worked in the history of his career? It hasn't.
Not good, man. We'll see you guys soon. Hit that subscribe button. Go Mavs.